The King is Dead. This is a game by Osprey Games that I've been wanting to play for quite a while, and recently I saw a copy in a game store and I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a try. And I'm glad that I did, because I can already tell you this is a really good game. I enjoyed it a great deal. The King is Dead is played on this beautiful map, beautiful mounted board, all the components look very good, but although the map is so evocative, the game is in nature pretty abstract, and that's okay. There are some abstract games that are really good, and this happens to be one of them. There are 8 regions on the map. Each region corresponds to a card. At the beginning of the game, you shuffle the cards together and then you randomly place them next to these slots here that are numbered, as you can see, from 1 to 8. That indicates the order in which the regions will be resolved. So first we will resolve this region here, we'll see who gets to control it, then we'll resolve this region here, this one here, and so on and so forth, until we get to the end of the last region. There are 3 groups that are trying to take control of the big island, blue, red, and yellow, and at the beginning of the game, you set the board, you set it up sort of randomly. I mean, you have kind of a little bit of concentration here. You need to place 2 red cubes here, 2 yellow cubes here, and 2 blue cubes there. But other than that, then you place all the other cubes in a bag, shuffle it, and you place cubes randomly until each region has 4. So it's just a matter of slight concentration in 3 areas, but most of the setup is random, and then you place the remaining cubes there to form the pool. Each player has a hand of 8 cards. The cards are all identical, that is, the hands are all identical. And, well, again, each turn we will resolve a region, we'll see which group dominates it. That group gets to place one of their tokens on the map, and the corresponding cubes, the cubes that are still there, are removed from there, and now the region is sealed. The region is under control of that faction. That, for example, if red controls it, yes, at the beginning of a turn, of a struggle for a region, the group that has the majority will get to control it. If there is a tie, then none of our 3 factions, red, blue, and yellow, will control the region, but the Saxons will take advantage of that stalemate. They'll get to control the region. Actually, let's just say that that blue got to control the region. By the way, that, as you can see, the control symbols are pretty much the same as the setup symbols. I wish that these setup symbols weren't here. They're just distracting, and really all that they do is to remind you during setup to place 2 cubes there. The setup instructions could tell us that. And when you teach the game to new people, somebody will ask, wait a second, what are those symbols for? Oh, is that a special reason? What kind of powers do I have in that region? As just setup. So, the regions will be resolved. Londinium, for example, will be resolved with that card. And then maybe this one. I keep wanting to resolve this one, but it's like really far. We're gonna cheat. So then we resolve this one, and they take control of it. Then this one, and this faction takes control of it, and so on and so forth. Once at the end of a turn, a region becomes controlled by a faction, it is sealed, it is locked. Players cannot interact with it and target it with effects in any way. Now, how do you affect things during the struggle itself? That is, before we get to count how many cubes of each type are in a region and replace the majority, and replace the cubes with a control token of the color of the majority. Well, players have these hands of cards. When it is your turn, you can choose to pass or to play a card. You never replenish your hand. That means that in a game you will perform 8 actions. You will play 8 cards, you will do 8 things, and that's it. Once you are done playing your cards, it's over. You just sit there and see what else happens. So on average, since there are 8 struggles, you have 8 cards, you'll play 1 card per struggle. But the finesse is, of course, in figuring out when it is the time to burn some resources and gain a certain advantage that will even allow you then to sit back and let things play out by themselves, because if you play 2 cards in a turn, you will have to skip a struggle. If you play 3 cards, you will have to skip 2 struggles, and so on and so forth. So during your turn, you pass or you play a card. Luckily enough, if you pass, you're not out of the struggle. The game keeps going around until everybody passes in a row. So it may be that now I'm passing, game goes back to me, I'm passing, game goes back to me, I decide to play. Game goes back here, I decide to pass, goes back, I decide to play again, and so on and so forth. When all players have passed in a row, that is when you resolve the struggle and you place a control token. When you do play a card, you do 2 things. So one is to play the card to resolve the effect, and one is to take a cube, any cube from the map, and to add it to your play area. Suppose my play area is this one. You place it there. And that represents your court. So I play this card, I resolve it, I take that cube. Later in the game, I play this other card, I resolve it, and I take another cube, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the game, I should have 10 cubes. You start with 2, and plus you have 1 cube that you'll get for each card. When you play a card, you have to resolve the effect to the best of your possibilities. Resolve as much as you can. If you cannot resolve any part of the effect, you still get at least a cube from the map to add to your court. Effects. You switch 2 cubes with a cube from an adjacent region. Say, for example, I want to upset the majority that the blue has there. So I'm gonna replace that one with these 2, 1 for 2. There is a similar card that replaces 1 for 1. These 2 cards, I simply take 3 cubes from the pool, from the common pool, and 1 per color, and I place them anywhere I want on the map. Again, not in regions that have already been resolved. I really want to establish a red majority here, and I want to establish a blue presence, a stronger presence there. I like yellow to have a majority there. So this is how you resolve those 2 cards. This card here, you switch the order in which 2 cards are going to be resolved. So you're manipulating the flow of the game, and then once you do that, you mark a card with this crown here. It simply means it cannot be switched again, it cannot be moved again. Then we have these cards that allow you to bring 2 cubes of reinforcements from the pool, each of the color of the card, and they go in regions that are adjacent to a region already controlled by that color. People are moving out and making a lot of babies, and that's what I think it represents. So with this card, I can place 2 blue cubes in regions that are adjacent to a region with blue cubes, and pretty much that means any region has them, so any region will count as adjacent to another one. And I can place, again, in up to 2 regions, so I can play both in an adjacent region, or the 2 of them, one in each of 2 different regions. So again, this seems obvious. Like here, it doesn't seem very exciting, but as regions get controlled and some regions or groups of regions may be sealed off and isolated, then these cards become harder and harder to play. For example, now Caledonia is not adjacent to anything, so these cards here would not have any effect. So pretty interesting. Again, depending if these regions get controlled first, then the island is cut in 2 and adjacency becomes a little trickier, or if the external regions become controlled first, then you have a lot of regions that are adjacent to one another. Depending on the order in which regions are resolved, these cards will be more or less effective. And pretty much that's how it works. You continue like this, players pass, 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 play a card, pass, 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 no, pass, 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 play a card, and so on and so forth, until all struggles have been resolved, and and also until all cards have been played. It is entirely possible, in fact, that the last couple of turns or struggles will sort of be on autopilot because players have played other cards. Then you simply resolve them, assign majority, and you see what happens there. So at the end of the game, the map will be full of control symbols, and the players will have a bunch of cubes. In front of themselves. That represents their court. At that point, you check which faction of the three colors, yellow, red, or blue, has the majority, is the commanding, the controlling, the dominating faction. Here, for example, we have 4 regions controlled by yellow, 2 by red, 2 by blue. Then definitely yellow is the winner. Yellow will control England. And what happens then? Your court represents your connections with the various tribes. So basically, once you establish which faction wins, the player that has the most cubes of that color in the court wins. In this case, for example, this player here wins because yellow wins, and this player had 3 cubes as opposed to the player having 2. So actually that doesn't necessarily mean having, having a lot of cubes in that number, in that color. It just means having 1 more than anybody else. Very interesting idea. And of course gives you a lot of interesting puzzles there to solve as you're trying to balance things out. This is how you play The King is Dead. Wow, what a good game this is. I'm so pleased that I finally picked up this game. Not a new one, but maybe it wasn't on your radar, maybe you haven't played it yet, so highly recommended already. More in detail, yes, in the main segment of my video I made a little bit of fun of how many times you pass in this game. Passing is most of what you do. But passing has never been so fun. Who knew that passing could be so good? Because passing here is not like in other games, you're cut out of the game for whatever reason, out of resources, you're forced to pass. It is a choice, and it is an incredibly powerful choice. So each turn you're grueling, should I pass or not? And then of course if you decide not to, then you have to decide which card you want to use. But it's such an active decision. I actively choose to pass because you're hoping to see what other people are doing. Maybe they are gonna go ahead and do something that you can undo later. You cannot undo things directly, meaning if I play a card to switch 2 blocks, you play another one to switch them back. That would be boring and silly. In the undoing in the broader sense, you add some cubes from one region, I bring some other cubes from another region, and upset the thing that you did. But of course, the most powerful thing of passing them is that if you pass enough and you are good enough at it, you will end up in a position where the opponent will have spent all of their cards, and then you can boom, 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 chain a series of events, a series of actions that will gain you victory. When at the end, with two players especially, if a player plays a lot of cards at the beginning and the player saves a lot of cards, at the end it becomes a little bit of a puzzle because, well, now I have 3 cards left and you are out of there, so it's almost a solo. I just have to solve this thing. May seem anticlimactic, but again, it comes as a result of a decision that one of the players has made to just burn through their resources, thinking that they were creating enough momentum that the opponent won't be able to take it back. So passing is important. Waiting until the opponent has fewer resources than you is great, unless you do it too much, and that's another really interesting element. As you've seen, as I was showing you the board, the fact that the areas will get controlled during the game, and so they'll get sealed out of the game. You cannot interact with them in any way. Changes the geography of the game entirely from game to game. It seems simple, but that map really has a lot of interesting options, again, depending on which regions get locked and which regions are still available and adjacent to which ones, then different possibilities open. So if you save your cards, and certain cards especially, for too long, then at the end, okay, still good, you're still gonna get a courtier in your court, but other than that, not much. So actually not anything if you cannot use the card, if you're just burning it, playing it to get that follower there. So that means, of course, that you waited up until a point where your cards lost effectiveness. And if your opponent is using cards for effects and for cubes, and you only use them for gaining cubes, it's probably not going to be all that well for you. Things are not going to go well. So definitely there is such a fine tightrope that you have to walk there, especially considering that you have 8 cards, and again, depending on how things play out, 2 of them may turn out to be virtually useless, at least in terms of effects. So going too early, you'll regret, oh my gosh, I wish I had that card. Of course, waiting for too long, oh my gosh, now I'm not able to do what I wanted to do. So actually, each card that you play is a momentous decision. And again, precisely because passing doesn't get you out of the round, but simply means that you're hedging your bets. But again, it doesn't mean that then everybody's just passing and waiting forever, because again, waiting too long is a problem. Then you have such an interesting dilemma there. Game so simple, so tight, in which playing each card means so much. It's a really impressive game. The design is super simple, the rules are super simple, and the strategy is so much deeper than you would expect. And of course, because also, again, the other balancing act that you have to do is how you get not just a certain faction to win on the board, but to be the player with the most cubes in that faction. And there are several tiebreakers in case players have the same number, in case, for example, 2 factions are equally represented on the board, or 2 players have the same number of cubes of the winning faction. There's several tiebreakers, and again, if you think about it, with just such a small court at the end of the game, the player that has the majority maybe will have 4 cubes, but everybody else will have 3. Or maybe the player will have again 2 and everybody else 1. The difference is not that large. So again, it is really, when I see a player who has 2 cubes in a certain faction more than I do, and that faction looks like it might win, then either I brutally go after that faction, I absolutely make certain that the faction does not win, or try to get more cubes that the player does, which is not that easy when you have so few cards and you'll get so few cubes in general. Or a mix of the two, really, or I try to figure out different ways of getting a chord is sort of flexible and see where things go, or again, manipulating the tiebreaker, very, very important too. So, a lot of simple but very momentous, very fun, very engaging decisions. A simple abstract game which is as tight and minimalistic as not many other games that I played before, and really achieves its goal of giving you an experience which is which is very engrossing, really draws you in, really gives you a lot to think about, and you're thinking about the strategy, the ones that you want to implement and create, the ones that the players are trying to pull off, because again, you need not many cubes, or 1 more than the opponent, so everything is very fluid. One thing, of course, is that the game may be prone to analysis paralysis. True, ways you may think, yeah, sort of like most information is available. Yes, you don't get to see the cards that the other players play before, but especially if you play with 2 players, it's pretty much very easy to get a sense of what the opponent still has in their hand. That means pretty much that it's almost perfect information. And there is that. The game has that danger, but again, as I so often say, know your players, know the people that you play games with. Do not play with that guy that you know is gonna drive everybody nuts with just by paralyzing the game and trying to figure out every possible outcome and then making everybody suffer in the process. If you are not afraid of The King is Dead, or just say if you plan to play with players that will not cause analysis paralysis, then The King is Dead is a blast to play. It's simple, it is short, it's not a filler. It is as simple as most fillers out there, but it has much more meat on its bones that meets the eye. Really fun game, fun, exciting, a lot to think about, a lot of interaction, a miracle in design economy. Definitely a game that I enjoyed very much. The King is Dead.